My wife, the CEO, spat on my face and slided the paper across. Accept the 90% salary reduction, or I'll find someone who will. Just to embarrass me in front of her new 22-year-old lover and staff. I need 20 hours, I said calmly. That night, I called the company's biggest competitor. Turns out, they'd been waiting for me to. You know how they say you never see the knockout punch coming? Well, I sure as hell didn't see this one. There I was, sitting in our mahogany boardroom at Argonne Ventures, the same room where Cassandra and I used to dream about changing the world, back when we were broke 20-somethings with nothing but ambition and cheap coffee. Now, 15 years later, that same room felt like a damn courtroom, and I was about to get sentenced. The morning had started normal enough. I'd grabbed my usual black coffee from the lobby cafe, exchanged pleasantries with Maria at the front desk, and walked through the glass doors of the company we'd built from scratch. Our company. At least, that's what I still foolishly believed. The nameplate on my office door still read Co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer. But hell, those were just words on brass at this point. I should have known something was off when I walked into the boardroom and saw all 12 department heads already seated. Usually, these quarterly strategy meetings were just Cassandra, myself, and maybe 3 senior staff. But today, every single person who mattered at Argonne was there, sitting around that polished table like they were waiting for a show to start. And damn if I wasn't about to be the main attraction. Cassandra stood at the head of the table in her power suit, the charcoal gray one that made her look like she could buy and sell small countries. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she'd started wearing ever since she decided being so meant looking like she could freeze hellfire with a glance. But it was the smirk on her face that should have been my first real warning. That wasn't the smile of the woman I'd married 12 years ago. That was the smile of a predator who'd been circling wounded prey. And there, right beside her like some kind of designer accessory, was Trent, 22 years old, fresh out of business school, with perfectly styled brown hair and a jawline that probably cost his daddy's insurance a fortune in orthodontics. Strategy advisor, my ass. Everyone in that room knew exactly what kind of advising he was doing, and it sure as hell wasn't happening in any conference room. Thanks for joining us, Cassandra said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when she was about to drop a bomb. I know this is unusual, calling everyone together like this, but I felt it was important that our entire leadership team witness this conversation. Witness, not participate, not contribute. Witness, like I was about to confess to a crime or something. I kept my mouth shut and waited. In business, just like in poker, the first person to speak usually loses. But Cassandra had always been better at reading tells than I was. We need to discuss your compensation package, she continued, walking slowly around the table like she was giving a lecture. The board has been reviewing performance metrics, and frankly, we're not seeing the return on investment we need from your current role. The room got so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. I glanced around at faces I'd known for years, people I'd hired, mentored, fought alongside in the trenches when we were trying to land our first major contract. Now they were all staring at their hands or their laptops, anywhere but at me. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, keeping my voice level. Never let them see you sweat. That's what my old man used to say. That's when she did it. Cassandra reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She walked over to where I was sitting, looked me dead in the eye, and then, I swear to God, she spit right in my face. Not a little fleck of saliva from talking too enthusiastically. A deliberate, calculated glob of spit that landed on my left cheek and started dripping down toward my collar. The entire room collectively held its breath. I could feel 12 pairs of eyes watching to see how I'd react. Would I explode? Would I storm out? Would I grab her by the shoulders and demand to know what the hell had happened to the woman I'd built a life with? Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my handkerchief, the navy blue one with my initials that Cassandra had given me for our 5th anniversary, and calmly wiped my face. I folded the handkerchief, put it back in my pocket, and looked up at her like she'd just handed me a cup of coffee. She slid the paper across the polished table. It landed right in front of me with a soft whisper of sound that somehow felt louder than a gunshot. Accept the 90% salary reduction, or I'll find someone who will, she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for everyone to hear clearly. You've got until tomorrow morning to decide. 90%. From 250,000 a year down to 25 grand. That wasn't a salary cut. That was a humiliation ritual. That was her way of saying I was worth less than the kid who delivered our lunch orders. I unfolded the paper and read through the terms. It was all legal and proper, signed by the board, witnessed by the company attorney. Everything by the book, except for the part where my own wife had just treated me like something she'd scrape off her shoe in front of our entire executive team. Trent was practically glowing beside her, that smug little smile playing at the corners of his mouth, like he was watching his favorite movie. This wasn't just about money or business strategy. This was personal. This was Cassandra making sure everyone in that room knew exactly where I stood in the new hierarchy. I need 20 hours, I said quietly, folding the paper and slipping it into my jacket pocket next to the handkerchief. 20 hours, she agreed. Not a minute more. I stood up, straightened my tie, and looked around the room one more time. These people, Maria from HR, Jenkins from operations, Sarah from marketing, they'd all worked with me for years. Some of them owed their careers to recommendations I'd made. Now they couldn't even make eye contact. I'll have an answer for you by 10 a.m. tomorrow, I said. I walked out of that boardroom with my head high and my back straight, just like my father taught me when I was 8 years old and Tommy Richardson was calling me names on the playground. Never let them see you break. Save that for when you're alone. But I wasn't thinking about crying or breaking down. As I walked past Maria's desk and through those glass doors, past the company logo we designed together on a napkin in a dive bar downtown, I felt something else entirely. Something had shifted inside me, like a gear clicking into place after years of grinding against nothing. That wasn't just disrespect back there. That was a declaration of war. And Cassandra had made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that I knew where all the bodies were buried. I sat in my car in the parking garage for God knows how long after walking out of that boardroom. The engine was off, but I couldn't bring myself to turn the key and drive anywhere that mattered. Home felt like enemy territory now, and the office, well, that wasn't mine anymore either, was it? So I just sat there like some kind of pathetic statue, staring at the concrete wall in front of me and trying to figure out what the hell had just happened to my life. My phone buzzed with texts I didn't want to read. Probably Cassandra, probably her lawyer, probably someone wanting to twist the knife a little deeper. I turned the damn thing off and shoved it in the glove compartment like it might bite me. When I finally did start the car, I had no destination in mind. I just drove. Through downtown, past the coffee shop where Cassandra and I used to meet before we were married, past the park where we'd take Zuri when she was little and still thought her daddy hung the moon. Every street held some memory of better times, back when we were a team instead of whatever the hell we'd become. I ended up on the interstate, just following the flow of traffic like a piece of driftwood caught in a current. The sun was setting, painting the sky all orange and pink, the kind of sunset that used to make me feel grateful for the life I'd built. Now it just looked like the world was on fire. 3 hours later, I pulled into the parking lot of some 24-hour truck stop diner off Route 46. The kind of place that's seen better decades, where the coffee's strong enough to wake the dead and nobody asks too many questions about why you're eating pie at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. The neon sign flickered Mel's Diner in letters that had probably been bright red some time back when Reagan was president. Inside, the place was exactly what you'd expect. Cracked vinyl booths, checkerboard linoleum that had seen a million spilled cups of coffee, and the persistent smell of bacon grease that had soaked into every surface. There were maybe 6 other customers scattered around. A trucker working on a plate of meatloaf, 2 college kids sharing a basket of fries, and an old guy at the counter nursing what looked like his 10th cup of coffee. I slid into a corner booth and tried to blend into the scenery. The waitress came over after a few minutes. A woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag said Brenda. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked, and something about the way she said sir hit me right in the chest. Not sarcastic, not condescending, just genuine respect for a customer she'd never seen before and would probably never see again. "Just coffee," I said. "Black." "You sure? Kitchen's still open. Mel makes a mean apple pie." I almost said no, but something about her warm smile made me reconsider. "You know what? Yeah, pie sounds good." She brought the coffee first, hot, strong, and served in one of those thick white mugs that probably weighed half a pound empty. Then came the pie, A generous slice with a flaky crust and apples that actually tasted like they'd been picked from a tree instead of processed in some factory. "This is really good," I told her when she came by to refill my cup. "Don't sound so surprised," she laughed. "Mel's been making that same pie for 32 years. Figure he's got it down by now." It was the first genuine conversation I'd had in weeks. Not some calculated business exchange or careful navigation around Cassandra's increasingly hostile territory. Just two people talking about pie like it was the most natural thing in the world. I ended up staying there until almost 2 in the morning, nursing coffee and picking at that slice of pie while my mind wandered through the wreckage of the day. Brenda checked on me every so often, never pushy, never trying to get me to order more or hurry up and leave. She just let me exist in that little bubble of normalcy while the rest of my world felt like it was collapsing. Around 1:30, she brought me a fresh cup without being asked and sat down across from me for a minute during the late-night lull. "Rough day?" she asked. "You could say that. Want to talk about it?" I considered it for a moment. Part of me wanted to spill the whole damn story to this stranger who had no stake in my drama, no reason to judge or take sides. But instead, I just shook my head. Not much to say. Just one of those days when you realize the person you thought had your back was actually holding the knife. Brenda nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. "Been there," she said simply. "The good news is, tomorrow's a new day. Things look different in the morning light sometimes." When I finally left Mel's diner, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, like I was still a human being worth treating with basic decency. Brenda had called me sir, and meant it. She'd served me coffee and pie without any agenda, any manipulation, any power games. For 3 hours, I'd been just another customer, not a liability to be managed or an obstacle to be removed. I drove home in the early morning darkness, but I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my driveway, looking at the house Cassandra and I had bought 8 years ago when Argon first started turning a real profit. The windows were dark, everyone asleep, no sign of the war that had been declared in that boardroom. But I knew now that I couldn't just walk back into that house and pretend nothing had changed. Cassandra had made her choice, drawn her battle lines. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, sitting in my driveway at 3 a.m., I made my first real decision since this whole nightmare started. I wasn't going to fight back loud and messy. I was going to rise quiet and deadly. 3 in the morning. That's when desperation and clarity tend to collide in a way that changes everything. I was still sitting in my driveway, engine off, staring at the dark windows of what used to feel like home. The house looked peaceful enough, white colonial with black shutters, perfectly manicured lawn that our landscaper Miguel kept pristine. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. From the inside, we were more like a slow-motion car crash. My phone had been buzzing intermittently from the glove compartment where I'd shoved it hours earlier. Probably Cassandra wondering where the hell I was, though knowing her, she was probably too busy celebrating her little power play with Boy Wonder Trent to notice I hadn't come home. The thought of them together made my stomach turn, but not with jealousy anymore, with something colder, more calculating. I retrieved the phone and scrolled through the missed calls and texts. 3 from Cassandra, all variations of "Where are you?" and "We need to talk." 2 from my attorney, probably wanting to discuss the legal implications of that document she'd slid across the table. And 1 from a number I didn't recognize, which I ignored. But then I stopped scrolling and stared at a contact I hadn't called in over 2 years, Jonas Herrera. Jonas. Man, I hadn't thought about him in months, but suddenly his name felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. We had history, the good kind. I'd hired him as a junior analyst about 6 years back, when he was fresh out of Northwestern, all eager energy and raw talent. Kid was sharp as a tack, could see patterns in data that most seasoned professionals missed. I'd taken him under my wing, taught him how to read between the lines in financial reports, how to spot opportunities that others walked right past. When Velmont Tech tried to poach him 3 years ago with a VP of operations offer, I'd been proud as hell. I'd written his recommendation letter myself, told their CEO that Jonas was the kind of leader you build a company around. He'd called me before accepting, asking if I thought he should take it. Hell yes, I'd told him. You're ready for this. Go show them what you're made of. And show them he did. Under Jonas's leadership, Velmont had grown from a mid-tier competitor to a serious threat in our space. They'd landed 3 major contracts that I knew Argonne had been chasing, including that massive telecommunications deal with Morrison Industries that Cassandra was still pissed about losing. What made Jonas special wasn't just his analytical skills, it was his loyalty. The kid never forgot where he came from or who'd helped him get there. Every few months, he'd send me articles he thought I'd find interesting, industry insights, sometimes just a text asking how things were going. I'd always responded, kept that connection alive even though we were technically competitors now. More importantly, I knew Velmont had tried to recruit me. Twice. Once about 18 months ago when they were expanding their strategic planning division, and again 6 months back when they were looking for someone to head up their new West Coast operations. Both times, they'd gone through Jonas as an intermediary, feeling out whether I'd be interested in a conversation. Both times, I'd said no without even hearing the offer. Loyalty to Cassandra, to Argonne, to the company we'd built together. What a fucking joke that seemed like now. I stared at Jonas's name on my phone screen. 3 a.m. wasn't exactly normal business hours, but Jonas had always been a night owl. Back when he worked for me, some of his best insights came during those late-night sessions when the office was empty and his mind could wander through problems without distraction. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit call. 1 ring. 2 rings. I half expected it to go to voicemail. What kind of VP answers unknown calls at 3 in the morning? But on the 3rd ring, Jonas's familiar voice came through the speaker. Well, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. If it isn't the mentor himself. Though I gotta say, 3 a.m. is a new record for you. How'd you know it was me? Are you kidding? I've had your number saved as the boss since the day I left Argonne. Plus, caller ID exists, old man. He chuckled, but there was warmth there, genuine affection. What's got you calling at this ungodly hour? Please tell me you're finally ready to have that conversation we've been dancing around for the past year and a half. That's when I knew Jonas had been waiting for this call. Maybe not at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, but he'd been waiting. Smart kid. No, smart man now. Had probably seen the writing on the wall at Argonne before I'd been willing to admit it to myself. I was hoping this day would come, he continued when I didn't immediately respond. Not because I wanted to see you get screwed over, but because I knew eventually you'd realize what everyone else in this industry already knows. Which is, that you're wasted at Argonne. Have been for years. You built that company, man, and then you let them turn you into middle management while your wife plays CEO with some kid who probably still gets carded at restaurants. The fact that Jonas knew about Trent shouldn't have surprised me. Industry gossip traveled fast, especially when it involved leadership drama at a company the size of Argonne. But hearing it confirmed that my humiliation was already public knowledge stung more than I'd expected. So, Jonas continued. What finally broke the camel's back? I gave him the abbreviated version, the boardroom ambush, the salary reduction demand, the very public humiliation. I left out the part about the spit. Some things were just too personal to share, even with someone I trusted. Jesus, Jonas said when I finished. That's cold, even for corporate warfare. Though honestly, I'm surprised it took this long. Word on the street has been that you've been getting iced out for months. Word on the street? Come on, you know how this works. Vendors talk, clients gossip, employees jump ship and spill everything to their new employers. Half the industry knows Cassandra's been systematically undermining your authority since she started banging the strategy advisor. There it was, laid out in stark terms. My professional reputation was already damaged goods, and I'd been too proud or too naive to see it happening. So what do you want to do about it? Jonas asked. I looked up at the dark windows of my house, thought about Zuri sleeping upstairs, probably dreaming about whatever 10-year-olds dream about. She deserved better th. Now you're talking. Can you meet me at 6 a.m.? 6 a.m. came faster than I expected, but hell, when you've been sitting in your driveway all night running scenarios through your head, time moves in weird ways. I'd finally gone inside around 4, grabbed a shower, and put on my best suit, the charcoal gray Armani that Cassandra had bought me for my 40th birthday, back when she still pretended to give a damn about making me look successful. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I was going to look like I belonged there. I didn't bother with breakfast. My stomach was doing gymnastics, and coffee was about all I could handle. Besides, this wasn't a social call. This was business, the kind that could either save my career or blow it up completely. No middle ground, no safety net. Velmont Tech's headquarters looked like everything Argonne wanted to be, but never quite achieved. Sleek glass and steel rising 32 floors into the morning sky, with a lobby that screamed success without being obnoxious about it. Their logo, a stylized mountain peak, was etched into the marble wall behind the reception desk, subtle but unmistakable. This was a company that knew its worth and didn't need to shout about it. The security guard recognized my name on his list and handed me a visitor's badge without the usual corporate runaround. Jonas had smoothed the way, just like he used to do when he worked for me. Kid. Man, I had to stop thinking of him as a kid. Had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The elevator ride to the 28th floor gave me time to think about what I was really doing here. 12 hours ago, I'd been a co-founder and chief strategy officer of a successful venture capital firm. Now I was essentially a free agent, jobless in all but the technical sense, about to negotiate with our biggest competitor. If Cassandra found out about this meeting, she'd probably try to sue me for corporate espionage or some other bullshit charge her lawyers could dream up. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Once you hit it, there's nowhere to go but up. And I was done being afraid of Cassandra's lawyers, her tantrums, or her pathetic boy toys' smug little smirks. Jonas was waiting for me when the elevator doors opened, looking every inch the successful executive in his navy suit and crimson tie. He'd filled out since his analyst days. Carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're good at what you do. But when he smiled and extended his hand, I saw echoes of that eager young guy who used to stay late just to pick my brain about market trends. "You look like hell," he said with a grin. "Thanks. You look like a VP. Funny how that works." He gestured toward a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Come on, let's talk somewhere private." The conference room was impressive without being intimidating. Polished oak table, leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a view that made you feel like you were on top of the world. Jonas closed the door and activated some kind of privacy screen that frosted the glass walls. Whatever we were about to discuss, he wanted to make sure it stayed between us. "Coffee?" he asked, gesturing to a service cart that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. "Black, strong enough to wake the dead." He poured 2 cups and handed me one. The coffee was perfect, rich, smooth, with just enough bite to remind you that you were alive. Everything at Velmont seemed to be a subtle upgrade from what I was used to at Argonne. "So," Jonas said, settling into his chair and fixing me with that analytical stare I remembered from our old brainstorming sessions. "Before we dive into the fun stuff, I need to ask the obvious question. Are you actually free to have this conversation? Or are we going to end up in some legal nightmare because of non-compete clauses?" I couldn't help but laugh. You know what's funny? Cassandra let my non-compete expire last year. Apparently, she was so confident that I'd never leave, she didn't bother renewing it. Her lawyers are probably shitting themselves right about now, assuming they've figured out where I am. Jonas's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "You're telling me that the woman who just tried to cut your salary by 90% forgot to lock you down legally? Ironic, isn't it? The CEO who's supposedly so much smarter than me made a rookie mistake that any first-year law student would catch." "Jesus Christ," Jonas muttered, shaking his head. "It's like she wanted you to walk." He reached into a leather portfolio and pulled out a manila folder that looked suspiciously thick. "Well, in that case, let's talk about your future. We've been watching your situation at Argonne for months, waiting for the right moment to approach you again. Yesterday's boardroom drama just accelerated our timeline." I raised an eyebrow. "You heard about that already? Are you kidding? Half the industry heard about it. Sarah Martinez from Morrison Industries called me personally this morning to ask if we were going to make you an offer. Apparently, she's not thrilled about working with Cassandra now that you're not involved in account management." That hit me right in the gut. Sarah and I had developed Morrison's expansion strategy together over 6 months of late-night conference calls and weekend strategy sessions. If she was already looking to jump ship from Argonne Services, Cassandra's power play was going to cost the company a lot more than my salary. Jonas slid the folder across the table. "Here's what we're prepared to offer." I opened it and felt my eyebrows climb toward my hairline. The title page read Senior Director of Global Expansion, Compensation Package, and Equity Structure. Below that was a salary figure that made my current pay look like pocket change. "Triple your reduced salary," Jonas said, watching my face. full authority over international development, your own team, and a benefits package that includes stock options tied to the contracts you bring in. Plus, we'll match your 401k contributions up to 15% and throw in a company car. I flipped through the pages, scanning the details. Health insurance that actually covered everything, for weeks paid vacation, and a performance bonus structure that could potentially double my base salary if I hit certain targets. It was everything I'd been trying to negotiate at Argonne for the past 3 years, handed to me on a silver platter. There's one more thing, Jonas said, pulling out another document. This is our non-compete agreement. Standard 2-year term, but with a twist. It specifically exempts Argonne Ventures from the restricted company list. I looked up at him. Meaning if you want to go head-to-head with your ex-wife's company and steal every client she's got, we're not going to stop you. In fact, we're counting on it. The offer was everything I could have hoped for and more. Respect, autonomy, financial security, and the chance to prove that Cassandra had made the biggest mistake of her professional life. All I had to do was sign on the dotted line and walk away from 15 years of building something with the woman I'd once loved. I picked up the pen Jonas had placed beside the folder. Any questions? He asked. Just one. When do I start? How about Monday? I signed my name with a flourish, each letter feeling like a small act of rebellion. When I handed the document back to Jonas, he was grinning like a shark who'd just spotted a school of fish. Welcome to Velmont Tech, he said. This is going to be fun. As I walked out of that building with a signed offer letter in my jacket pocket, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not just for my career, but for my dignity, my self-respect, and my ability to show my daughter what it looked like when someone refused to stay down. Cassandra thought she'd checkmated me. She had no idea the game was just getting started. The next morning felt different. Not just because I'd barely slept, or because I had a signed offer letter from Velmont burning a hole in my jacket pocket. It felt different because for the first time in months, I wasn't walking into Argonne Ventures as a victim. I was walking in as a man who knew exactly what he was worth and where he was going. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. The navy blue suit Cassandra and I had bought together when we were pitching our first major investors 7 years ago. Back then, we'd been a team, finishing each other's sentences and presentations, tag-teaming potential clients like we'd been doing it our whole lives. The suit had been our lucky charm, the armor we wore when we needed to project confidence we didn't quite feel yet. Now it felt like a uniform for a different kind of battle. The morning routine at Argonne was exactly the same as always. Maria at the front desk with her cheerful "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." The elevator music that hadn't changed since we moved into this building, the familiar ding of the 22nd floor. But I wasn't the same man who'd left this place yesterday afternoon. Yesterday, I'd been someone who could be publicly humiliated and expected to just take it. Today, I was someone with options. I walked past my office, former office, really, without stopping. The nameplate was already gone, I noticed. Efficient as always, our facilities team. Probably had orders from Cassandra to erase any trace of me before I even made my decision about that ridiculous salary reduction. Her office door was closed, which meant she was either on a call or having another strategy session with Trent. I knocked once and walked in without waiting for permission. After 15 years together, professional and personal, I figured I'd earned the right to skip the formalities. Cassandra was sitting behind her desk, still in power mode with her hair pulled back and her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up from whatever document she was reviewing, and I saw something flicker across her face, surprise, maybe, or annoyance that I hadn't waited to be invited in. "You're early," she said, glancing at her watch. "I thought you'd need the full 20 hours to make such a difficult decision." Turns out it wasn't that difficult after all. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared that morning. Clean white paper, my resignation letter typed on official letterhead, dated and signed. I placed it on her desk with the same deliberate precision she'd used when sliding that salary reduction document across the boardroom table. "My resignation," I said simply. She stared at the envelope for a long moment, like it might explode if she touched it. Then she looked up at me with that calculating expression I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant she was trying to figure out my angle, my weakness, my next move. "Running away?" she asked, leaning back in her chair with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No," I replied. "I'm stepping up." That's when I pulled out the second document, the signed offer letter from Velmont Tech. I didn't hand it to her, just held it up so she could see the letterhead, the official seal, the unmistakable weight of a real opportunity. Her eyes widened as she processed what she was looking at. The smirk disappeared completely, replaced by something I hadn't seen on Cassandra's face in years, genuine shock. "You can't," she said, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Actually, I can. You forgot something pretty important when you were planning your little boardroom coup yesterday." "What are you talking about?" "My non-compete clause. The one you let expire last year because you were so confident I'd never have the balls to leave." I tucked the offer letter back into my jacket. "Turns out your lawyers aren't as thorough as you thought they were." The color drained from her face as the implications hit her. She grabbed her phone and started scrolling frantically, probably looking for her attorney's number. But I knew she wouldn't find any legal recourse there. Jonas and I had been thorough. This was airtight. That's when the office door opened and Trent walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing that same smug expression he'd had in the boardroom yesterday. He was laughing about something, probably some inside joke between him and his older lover, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "Morning, beautiful," he said to Cassandra, then noticed me standing there. His smile faltered slightly. "Oh, hey there, Chief. Didn't expect to see you here so early." "Chief." The condescending little shit actually called me Chief, like I was some aging security guard he could dismiss with fake friendliness. "Actually," I said, "I was just leaving. Permanently." I turned back to Cassandra, who was still staring at my resignation letter like it contained nuclear launch codes. "You know what's funny?" I continued. "Yesterday, you asked me to accept being worth $25,000 a year. Today, someone else decided I'm worth 3 times what I was making here, with equity and full authority over a division that's going to directly compete with everything you've built." Trent's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. "Wait, what's happening here?" "What's happening?" I said, "is that your girlfriend just learned the difference between a chess move and a checkers move. She thought she was being clever, backing me into a corner. But all she really did was remind me that I'm too good for this place." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back one more time. "Oh, and Cassandra, you might want to call Sarah Martinez at Morrison Industries. I have a feeling she's going to have some questions about the continuity of her account management, now that the person who actually developed her expansion strategy won't be around to implement it." I could see the panic starting to creep into her eyes as she realized this wasn't just about losing me. It was about losing everything I brought to the table. The relationships, the institutional knowledge, the client trust that couldn't be replaced with PowerPoint presentations and MBA buzzwords. Trent was looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match, finally starting to understand that his little victory lap yesterday had been premature. "You can't just walk away from everything we built together," Cassandra said. And for a moment, I heard an echo of the woman I'd married, the one who used to believe we were stronger together than apart. "We didn't build this together," I replied. "I built it and you took it. There's a difference." I walked out of that office, past the stunned faces in the hallway who'd probably heard at least part of our conversation, past Maria at the front desk who looked like she wanted to say something but didn't know what, and into the elevator that would take me away from Argonne Ventures for the last time. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Trent in Cassandra's office, his coffee forgotten, gesturing wildly while she sat frozen behind her desk with my resignation letter still unopened in front of her. Neither of them were laughing anymore. They say news travels fast in the business world, but I had no idea just how fast until my phone started buzzing before I even made it to my car in the parking garage. The first text came from Angela Rodriguez at Orion Motors while I was still processing what had just happened in Cassandra's office. "Heard through the grapevine you left Argonne. Call me when you get a chance. We should talk." Then Isaac from Foresight AI. "Is it true you're no longer with Argonne? We've got some opportunities coming up that might interest you." By the time I reached my car, I had 6 messages from various contacts in the industry, all variations on the same theme. Word was already spreading that I'd walked away from the company I'd helped build, and people were reaching out like vultures circling fresh roadkill. Except in this case, they saw opportunity instead of carrion. The funny thing was, I hadn't contacted a single one of them. I hadn't posted anything on LinkedIn, hadn't sent out any announcements or networking emails. But somehow, Within an hour of walking out of Argon's offices, half my professional network knew I was available. That's when it hit me. Loyalty in this business doesn't follow companies or titles. It follows people. And apparently, more people had been paying attention to my contributions at Argon than I'd realized. I drove straight to Velmont Tech, where Jonas was waiting for me with a grin that could have powered the building's lights for a week. "How'd it go?" he asked as I walked into his office. "Better than expected." Cassandra looked like someone had just told her Christmas was canceled. "I'll bet." "And speaking of good news, we've already got your office set up on the 26th floor. Corner office, city view, the works. Plus, I've been making some calls this morning, and it looks like we're going to have plenty of opportunities to put your skills to work." Jonas handed me a cup of that excellent coffee and gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Madison Pierce from Lucretia Data called me about 20 minutes ago. Apparently, she's been working with Argon on a market expansion strategy, but she's not thrilled with the direction things are heading since you got sidelined." Madison. I remembered her, sharp as a whip, ran a data analytics company that had grown from a two-person startup to a major player in predictive modeling over the past 5 years. We'd worked together on 3 different projects, including the algorithm that helped her land that massive government contract last year. What did she say? That she'd rather work with the person who actually understood her business model than the people who just wanted to treat her like another line item in a portfolio. Her contract with Argon expires next month, and she's very interested in exploring alternatives. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately, David Kim from Nexus Financial. "You should probably take that," Jonas said, noticing me looking at the phone. "David," I answered. "How's business?" "It was fine until I heard you weren't with Argon anymore," came his familiar voice through the speaker. "Please tell me the rumors aren't true." David and I had worked together for almost 3 years, developing the investment strategy that had helped Nexus expand into the European markets. He was old school, the kind of guy who believed in handshake deals and long-term relationships over flashy presentations and quarterly reports. "Depends on which rumors you've heard. The one where Cassandra lost her damn mind and forced you out." I glanced at Jonas, who was trying not to look too interested in my conversation while obviously hanging on every word. "Let's just say we had a difference of opinion about my value to the organization." "Jesus Christ," David muttered. "That woman's going to run that company into the ground without you." "Look, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Are you planning to stay in the industry?" "As a matter of fact, I am. Just signed with Velmont Tech this morning." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Velmont? Jonas Herrera's outfit." "The very same." "Well, I'll be damned. In that case, we need to set up a meeting. I've go." Practically bouncing in his chair. "This is even better than I hoped," he said. "We figured it would take at least 6 months to build up your client base here. At this rate, you'll be fully booked by the end of the week." Over the next few hours, the calls and messages kept coming. Some were from existing Argon clients who were concerned about continuity on their projects. Others were from companies I'd worked with in the past who saw an opportunity to reconnect. A few were from competitors who wanted to explore partnership opportunities now that I wasn't tied to Argon's exclusivity agreements. By lunchtime, Jonas had assembled a small team to help me transition into my new role. First was Malik Johnson, my former project manager from Argon, who'd left 6 months earlier after getting frustrated with Cassandra's micromanagement style. He'd been working as a freelance consultant, but Jonas convinced him to come aboard full-time as my deputy director. "Man, I was hoping this day would come," Malik said when he walked into my new office. "Working for Cassandra without you there as a buffer was like trying to navigate a minefield blindfolded." Next was Serena Walsh from the finance department, a brilliant analyst who'd been underutilized at her previous firm. Jonas had recruited her specifically to support my division, knowing that the kind of complex international expansion projects I specialized in required someone who could model financial scenarios across multiple currencies and regulatory environments. Finally, there was Leo Chun, a creative director who'd been working on digital marketing strategies for tech startups. He was younger than the rest of us, probably fresh out of grad school, but his portfolio showed the kind of innovative thinking that could help us approach client challenges from angles our competitors wouldn't see coming. "So," Jonas said as we all gathered in the conference room for an impromptu strategy session, "what's our first move?" I looked around the table at these four talented professionals who'd chosen to bet their careers on my ability to deliver results. It was intimidating as hell, but also exhilarating in a way I hadn't felt in years. We're going to do something Argon never figured out how to do properly, I said. We're going to focus on solving our clients' actual problems instead of just trying to upsell them on services they don't need. Within 2 weeks, we'd converted 3 major accounts from Argon to Velmont. Not through aggressive sales tactics or undercutting prices, but simply by demonstrating that we understood their businesses better than anyone else in the market. Cassandra's empire was starting to show cracks, and we'd barely gotten started. 3 months. That's all it took for Cassandra's house of cards to start tumbling down. I wasn't actively trying to destroy Argon. Hell, I was too busy building something better at Velmont to waste time on revenge plots. But when you remove the foundation from a structure, gravity takes care of the rest. The first sign of trouble came through Madison Pierce at Lucretia Data. She'd officially terminated her contract with Argon and signed with Velmont, bringing along a $2.3 million project that Cassandra had been counting on to boost their quarterly numbers. But Madison didn't just take her business elsewhere. She started talking to other CEOs in her network about why she'd made the switch. It's simple, she told anyone who'd listen. I need partners who understand my industry, not consultants who treat every client like they're selling the same widget. Argon used to have that kind of insight. Now they're just another cookie-cutter firm trying to apply generic solutions to specific problems. That kind of word-of-mouth poison spreads fast in our industry. Within weeks, 3 other clients had requested meetings to reassess their strategic partnerships. Corporate speak for were shopping around for someone better. David Kim from Nexus Financial was next. His contract with Argon was locked in for another 6 months, but he found a creative way around it by bringing Velmont in as a secondary consultant on a new project that technically fell outside his existing agreement. The project was worth $1.8 million, and it was the kind of high-profile international expansion that would generate case studies and referrals for years to come. But the real damage wasn't just the money walking out the door, it was the reputation. In an industry built on relationships and trust, losing key clients sends a message that something's fundamentally wrong with your operation. Other potential clients start asking questions. Existing clients start wondering if they should be looking elsewhere. Staff members start updating their resumes. I heard about Argon's quarterly earnings report through Jonas, who'd gotten the information from Peter Rains, the chairman of Argon's board. The numbers were brutal: revenue down 18%, client retention at an all-time low, and profit margins that made their stock look like a penny stock waiting to happen. Cassandra tried to spin it during the earnings call with investors. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but Jonas played me the highlights over lunch at that Italian place near Velmont's offices. Market volatility, she kept saying. Temporary adjustment period. Strategic repositioning for long-term growth. All the corporate buzzwords that executives use when they're trying to explain why they've screwed up without actually admitting they've screwed up. But the investors weren't buying it. Neither were the board members. I could tell because Peter Rains called me directly on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing expansion proposals in my new corner office. What did she do? He asked without any pleasantries or small talk. Peter had always been direct. It's why he'd survived 30 years in venture capital without getting eaten alive by prettier talkers with weaker strategies. She forgot where the real value came from, I told him. The clients who just walked? The relationships that built those client connections in the first place. You can't just plug in a new strategy advisor and expect 15 years of trust and institutional knowledge to transfer over automatically. Peter was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him tapping his pen against his desk, the same nervous habit he'd had since I'd known him. The board's meeting tomorrow, he said finally. There are going to be some difficult conversations about leadership and direction. That's not my problem anymore, Peter. I know, but for what it's worth, I think you made the right call walking away when you did. Staying would have just made you complicit in the decline. A week later, the announcement came through industry newsletters and LinkedIn posts. Cassandra Thompson was stepping down as CEO of Argon Ventures to pursue new opportunities. The board had appointed Marcus Webb, their CFO, as interim CEO while they conducted a search for permanent leadership. I didn't celebrate when I heard the news. I didn't post anything on social media or call my contacts to gloat about how I'd been vindicated. I just kept working on the Morrison Industries expansion project that was going to establish Velmont as a serious player in the European markets. But I did do one thing. I sent flowers to the board's new interim CEO, a simple arrangement of white lilies with a card that read, "Focus on people, not headlines." The flowers weren't meant as a taunt or an insult. They were a reminder of something I'd learned the hard way. Businesses are built on relationships, not egos. You can have the best strategies in the world, but if you don't have people who trust you to execute them, you're just another consultant with a PowerPoint presentation. Cassandra had forgotten that lesson. She'd gotten so caught up in being the CEO, in having the title and the corner office and the young boyfriend who made her feel like she was still the smartest person in the room, that she'd lost sight of what actually made Argonne valuable in the first place. It wasn't the brand name or the fancy offices or the impressive client list. It was the trust that individual people, clients, employees, partners, had placed in the company's ability to solve their problems. And that trust was tied to specific relationships, specific expertise, specific people who'd earned it through years of delivering results. When those people left, the trust went with them. Marcus Webb called me a few days after the flowers arrived, probably at Peter's suggestion. "Thank you for the advice," he said. "Both the written version and the implied version. Just trying to help. Any chance you'd consider coming back? I know it's a long shot, but the board authorized me to make you an offer." I looked out my office window at the city skyline, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few months. The humiliation in the boardroom, the late-night drive to nowhere, the diner conversation with Brenda that had helped me remember I was still human. The phone call to Jonas that had changed everything. "I appreciate the offer, Marcus, but I'm exactly where I need to be." I figured you'd say that, but I had to ask. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started working on the quarterly report for Velmont's board. Revenue was up 47% since I joined, client satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and we had a pipeline of projects that would keep us busy through the next 18 months. Cassandra's fall hadn't been my goal, but it had been inevitable once she'd chosen power over partnership, ego over excellence. The market has a way of correcting itself when companies lose sight of what actually creates value. I'd just helped speed up the process. I'd gotten into the habit of staying late at the office, partly because I was genuinely excited about the work we were doing at Velmont, and partly because going home still felt complicated. The house I shared with Cassandra and Zuri had become a weird kind of neutral territory where we maintained civility for our daughter's sake, while pretending the nuclear fallout from our professional lives hadn't contaminated our personal space. But that Thursday evening was different. I'd finished the Morrison Industries presentation ahead of schedule, and for once, the stack of emails in my inbox looked manageable instead of overwhelming. At 5:30, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going home early. The drive from downtown to our neighborhood in Westfield usually gave me time to mentally shift gears from work mode to dad mode. But today, I didn't need the transition time. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like the same person in both places. The guy who was kicking ass in the boardroom was the same guy who was about to walk through his front door, not some fractured version trying to juggle competing identities. I pulled into our driveway at 6:15, which was practically midday by my recent standards. Cassandra's car wasn't there, probably at another strategy meeting with Trent, though God knows what they were strategizing now that she was officially unemployed. The thought should have bothered me more than it did, but honestly, her absence made everything easier. The house smelled like tacos and homework, that particular combination of dinner prep and childhood that every parent knows by heart. I could hear music coming from the kitchen, some pop song that Zuri had probably heard on the radio and immediately decided was the soundtrack to her entire existence. "Zuri," I called out. "I'm home, Dad." Her voice carried surprise and genuine excitement, which hit me harder than it should have. When was the last time my 10-year-old daughter had been excited to see me come home? Usually, I was sneaking in after she'd gone to bed, leaving before she woke up, existing on the periphery of her daily life, like some kind of well-meaning ghost. I found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by colored pencils, markers, and sheets of construction paper. Her homework was pushed to one side, math worksheets that looked like they'd been completed in record time, so she could move on to more interesting projects. "What are you working on?" I asked, loosening my tie and sitting down across from her. Art project for Mrs. Rodriguez's class, she said, not looking up from the drawing she was carefully coloring. We're supposed to draw our families. My stomach did a little flip. Family drawings had become landmines over the past year. The last one she'd brought home had featured Cassandra and herself standing in front of our house, with me nowhere to be found. When I'd asked about it, Zuri had just shrugged and said she'd drawn the people who were actually around. That had stung more than any boardroom humiliation. But this time, when she held up the paper with pride, I was there. Center of the composition, even. A stick figure in a blue suit, my favorite navy one, standing between two other stick figures in front of a house that looked remarkably like ours, complete with Miguel's perfectly maintained lawn and the oak tree we'd planted when Zuri was 3. It's our family, she announced, as if I might not have figured that out. I studied the drawing more carefully. There was me, there was Zuri with her long brown hair and the gap-toothed smile she was slightly self-conscious about, and there was Cassandra, positioned slightly apart from us but still clearly part of the group. No Trent, I noticed. Whatever was happening between her mother and the strategy advisor, Zuri either didn't know about it or didn't consider it relevant to her definition of family. You put me back, I said, remembering that previous drawing where I'd been conspicuously absent. She nodded seriously, the way kids do when they're about to say something that cuts right to the heart of things without meaning to. You're around again, she said simply. Like, actually around. Not just sleeping here sometimes. Jesus. Out of the mouths of babes. I knelt down beside her chair, so we were at eye level. You noticed that I hadn't been around much? Dad, you were like a ghost for months. You'd come home after I went to bed, leave before I woke up, and even when you were here on weekends, you were always on your phone or your laptop or staring at nothing like your brain was somewhere else. The accuracy of her observation was devastating. I'd been so caught up in the drama at Argonne, so focused on trying to salvage my professional relationship with Cassandra, that I'd let my relationship with my daughter wither without even realizing it. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean for that to happen. I know, she said, adding some green to the tree in her drawing. But it's better now. You seem, I don't know, happier? Like you remember how to smile for real instead of that fake smile you use when grown-ups ask how you're doing. That observation hit me like a punch to the gut. My 10-year-old had been watching me closely enough to distinguish between my genuine expressions and my social masks. How long had I been walking around with a fake smile, going through the motions of being okay, while everything fell apart around me? Are you happier? She asked, looking up from her drawing with those brown eyes that missed absolutely nothing. I thought about it for a moment. Was I happier? The divorce proceedings were going to be complicated and expensive. I was starting over professionally at an age when most people were thinking about consolidating their careers. My marriage was effectively over, even if we hadn't made it official yet. But sitting there in our kitchen, looking at a family drawing that included me for the first time in months, I realized the answer was yes. Yeah, kiddo, I think I am happier. Good, she said, adding a few more details to my stick figure suit. Because when you're happier, I'm happier. And when mom's not stomping around being angry all the time, she's happier too. It's like everybody can just be themselves instead of pretending to be okay when they're really not. I looked at this wise little human I'd helped create. This person who'd been quietly observing the adult drama swirling around her and drawing conclusions that were probably more accurate than anything the family therapist we'd seen briefly had come up with. You know what? I said, how about we order pizza and watch one of those movies you like? The ones with the singing and the dancing that make absolutely no sense to me, but seem to make you happy. Can we get the pizza with the weird vegetables you like? Absolutely. As Zuri carefully wrote her name in the corner of her family drawing, I felt something shift inside me. Not just relief or contentment, but actual joy. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what mattered most. Being Zuri's dad. Being present. Being real. I wasn't expecting her. 6 months had passed since Cassandra's unceremonious exit from Argonne, and we'd settled into a surprisingly functional routine of co-parenting through carefully scheduled exchanges and polite text messages. She'd moved into a downtown condo. I'd kept the house with Zuri, and we'd managed to avoid any face-to-face conversations beyond the absolutely necessary logistics of shared custody. So when my assistant Maria buzzed me at Velmont to let me know that Cassandra Thompson was in the lobby asking to see me, my first instinct was to assume there was some kind of emergency involving our daughter. Send her up, I told Maria, already reaching for my phone to check for missed calls or texts from Zuri's school. But when Cassandra stepped off the elevator onto Velmont's 26th floor, nothing about her body language suggested crisis mode. If anything, she looked diminished. Not physically. She was still the same tall, poised woman who could command attention just by walking into a room. But something in her presence had shrunk. The executive armor was gone, replaced by simple black slacks and a cream-colored blouse that made her look more like a job candidate than a former CEO. Nice office, she said when I met her at the elevator bank. Thanks. Coffee? Sure. I led her to my corner office, the one with the city view that Jonas had insisted I deserved. She sat in one of the client chairs across from my desk, while I poured 2 cups from the machine that had become my favorite perk of working at Velmont. So, I said, handing her the coffee and settling into my chair. What brings you to enemy territory? She managed a small smile at that. Is that what this is? I don't know. You tell me. Cassandra looked out the window for a moment, watching the traffic 26 floors below. When she turned back to me, I saw something I hadn't seen in her face for years. Uncertainty. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, she said quietly, about how everything fell apart. And I keep coming back to the same question. Why didn't you fight back? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected her to be here about Zuri, or maybe some legal detail related to our separation. I hadn't expected soul searching. I did fight back, I said. I just didn't swing. She frowned, trying to parse the distinction. What's the difference? Fighting back doesn't always mean hitting harder. Sometimes it means walking away from a fight you can't win and finding a better battlefield. But you could have made things difficult for me. I set down my coffee cup and really looked at her. This conversation felt surreal, like discussing strategy with a former opponent after the war was over and everyone had gone home. Why would I want to destroy something I'd helped create? Argonne wasn't just your company, Cassandra. It was our company. Just because you decided to push me out doesn't mean I wanted to see it burned down. But you did let clients leave. I didn't let them do anything. They made their own choices based on what they felt was best for their businesses. I never badmouthed Argonne, never tried to poach anyone, never even mentioned the details of why I left. People drew their own conclusions. She was quiet for a long time, turning her coffee cup in slow circles on the table beside her chair. You were always the better leader, she said finally. I see that now. The admission hung in the air between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. I was never trying to compete with you for leadership, I replied. We were supposed to be partners. But I didn't see it that way, did I? I saw it as a zero-sum game where one of us had to be in charge and the other had to follow. Why? I asked. What changed? Because we didn't start out that way. Remember those early days when we'd finish each other's sentences in client meetings? When we'd stay up until 3 a.m. working through strategy problems because we were both so excited about what we were building. Her smile was sad now, tinged with something that might have been regret. I got scared, she said. Success was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. Every new client, every expansion, every milestone just raised the stakes higher. And somewhere along the way, I started believing that I had to control everything to keep it from falling apart. Including me, especially you. Because you were the one person whose opinion actually mattered to me, whose approval I'd built my confidence on. When I started doubting myself, I started resenting you for being the source of my strength instead of finding my own. I'd never heard Cassandra talk about her insecurities so directly. Throughout our marriage and our business partnership, she'd always projected confidence and certainty, even when I could sense the anxiety underneath. And Trent. She actually laughed at that, though there wasn't much humor in it. Trent was 22 years old and thought I was brilliant for reasons that had nothing to do with actual business acumen. Being around him made me feel powerful in a way that didn't require me to actually be competent. Where is he now? Probably telling some other older woman how brilliant she is. We lasted about 6 weeks after I left Argonne. Turns out being unemployed made me significantly less fascinating. There was a knock on my office door, and Maria poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but your 3 o'clock is here for the Morrison Industries follow-up. I glanced at my watch. The afternoon had gotten away from me. Give me 5 more minutes, I told Maria. When she closed the door, Cassandra was already standing up. I should go, she said. I didn't mean to take up so much of your day. Cassandra, I said as she reached for her purse. She paused, looking back at me. What are you going to do now? I'm not sure yet. I've had some offers, consulting work, interim executive positions. Nothing that really excites me, but nothing that pays the bills either. She straightened her shoulders, and for a moment I saw a flash of the old determination. I'll figure it out. I always do. As she walked toward the door, she stopped and turned back one more time. You were always meant to be more than what I let you be, she said quietly. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. I just needed to walk away to realize it, I replied. After she left, I sat in my office for a few minutes before my next meeting, thinking about the woman I'd married and the woman who'd just walked out my door. They were the same person, but also completely different. Success and fear had twisted her into someone I barely recognized, and failure had apparently twisted her back into someone I remembered. It was the last time we ever spoke in person, and somehow, that felt exactly right. 1 year. That's how long it took to rebuild everything I thought I'd lost, and discover things I never knew I'd been missing. I was sitting in my office at Velmont Tech, but not the same one where Cassandra had visited me 6 months earlier. Jonas had promoted me to VP of Global Strategy, which came with a move to the 31st floor and a view that made you feel like you could see the entire world spread out below you. The morning sun was streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in that golden light that makes even Monday mornings feel full of possibility. The quarterly report on my laptop showed numbers that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Revenue was up 63% since I joined Velmont, and my division alone had brought in 12 major contracts that were worth more than Argon's entire annual intake. Client satisfaction scores were hitting records that had the company's PR team scrambling to figure out how to publicize our success without sounding like we were bragging. But the best part wasn't the money or the recognition. It was how different everything felt. When I walked into client meetings now, I wasn't trying to prove myself or justify my existence. I was just solving problems for people who trusted me to deliver results. The work had become pure again, stripped of all the office politics and ego battles that had poisoned my last few years at Argon. My team had grown too. Malik was now director of operations for the entire international division. Serena had been promoted to senior financial analyst with her own staff, and Leo was building a creative department that was attracting talent from agencies across the city. We'd become the division that other departments wanted to collaborate with, the group that made everyone else's jobs easier instead of more complicated. But the real measure of success wasn't professional, it was personal. Zuri was thriving. The shared custody arrangement with Cassandra had settled into a rhythm that actually worked for everyone. Weekdays with me, weekends with her mom, holidays alternating, and no more tension-filled handoffs where our daughter had to navigate the emotional minefield between her parents. She was getting straight A's in school, had made the select soccer team, and most importantly, she seemed genuinely happy. Just last week, she'd asked if she could bring her friend Jessica over for dinner. When I'd said yes, she'd looked at me with surprise. Really? You're not going to be working late? Really? I'll even cook something that doesn't come from a takeout bag. Who are you and what did you do with my dad? She'd joked, but there was real joy in her voice. That evening, watching Zuri and Jessica giggle over some inside joke while attempting to teach me the latest TikTok dance craze, I'd realized something profound. I was finally present in my own life. Not just physically there, but mentally and emotionally engaged with the people and moments that actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text notification, pulling me back to the present moment in my office. It was from David Kim at Nexus Financial, asking if I had time for a call about a potential expansion into the Asian markets. 6 months ago, a request like that would have sent me into overdrive, scrambling to prepare presentations and research reports. Now, I just smiled and typed back, absolutely. How's Thursday at 2 p.m.? That's when I saw the news alert pop up on my laptop screen. Former Argon CEO resurfaces at small startup after public exit. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the article. It was a brief piece in one of the industry trade publications, mentioning that Cassandra had accepted a consulting role with a fintech startup called Bridge Solutions. The photo showed her standing beside their CEO, a young entrepreneur who looked like he was maybe 25, and probably thought having a former Fortune 500 executive on his team would solve all his scaling problems. I stared at the article for a moment, waiting for some kind of emotional reaction. Satisfaction? Vindication? Pity? But all I felt was a mild sense of completion, like closing a book you'd enjoyed but were ready to move on from. I closed the browser tab and opened a fresh document. At the top of the page, I wrote, "The best payback isn't revenge. It's peace. The best revenge isn't loud. It's freedom. And the best decision I ever made was walking away." Below that, I started outlining my thoughts for Velmont's 5-year strategic plan. We had opportunities emerging in 3 new markets, partnerships with companies that valued long-term relationships over quick profits, and a team of people who genuinely enjoyed working together toward common goals. This was what success actually looked like, not the corner office or the impressive title or the salary that made other people envious. It was the ability to focus on work that mattered, to build something sustainable with people you respected, and to go home at the end of the day knowing you'd spent your time on things that would still matter tomorrow. My desk phone rang, and Jonas's voice came through the speaker. "You free for lunch? I want to talk about the Chun Industries proposal." "Absolutely. Give me 10 minutes to finish this up." As I saved the document and reached for my jacket, I caught my reflection in the office window. The man looking back at me was someone I recognized but hadn't seen in years. Relaxed shoulders, genuine smile, eyes that looked forward instead of constantly checking the rearview mirror for threats. A year ago, I'd thought my career was over, my reputation ruined, my life essentially finished at 43. I'd been publicly humiliated by someone I'd trusted, stripped of everything I'd worked to build, and forced to start over from scratch. But starting over, it turned out, had been exactly what I needed. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to walk away from something you thought you couldn't live without. Because only then do you discover what you actually can't live without, and more importantly, what kind of life you want to build when nobody else is dictating the terms. I walked out of my office and toward the elevator, ready for lunch with a colleague who'd become a real friend, ready for an afternoon of solving interesting problems with smart people, ready for an evening at home with my daughter who no longer had to wonder if her dad was really present or just going through the motions. The best payback, I'd learned, wasn't proving Cassandra wrong about my worth. It was proving myself right about what actually mattered.